So we've moved on from Amsterdam to Prague, which I would say is the most beautiful city in Europe, where it is dusk. Had dinner here on the hillside. And right now we're going to talk about John Lynch and the 49ers. Lynch spoke to the Pat McAfee show, and he confirmed everything that we had been reporting leading up to the draft and obviously reporting during and after the draft. That the 49ers, their plan A was to keep Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk. They're settled on that plan now. Obviously, they did keep their options open, but the most likely option to keep these guys around, to load up around them, that's the option that did materialize for the 49ers. So this is the short-term, long-term balance plan. I've been talking about it for weeks. John Lynch specified the plan on the Pat McAfee show.
I love our roster. I love the way it's comprised. As I said, we were right there, and we got to find a way to get just a little bit better. And I'm doing everything in my power to keep our roster together. And that's my goal. And I don't question that. I've got so much belief. When you talk about guys like Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo, they're guys we drafted. They're guys we take a lot of pride in what they've become, who they've become, and we couldn't be more proud of those guys. And so, during the course of drafts and off seasons, do conversations happen? Absolutely they do. We're past that now. And we're thrilled to add to that group Jawan Jennings, Brandon Aiyuk, Deebo Samuel, Chris Conley, Ronnie Bell, Danny Gray, and now you add Ricky Pearsall, Jake Cowing. I think we made an already strong group even stronger. And part of my job is to think about the now and then to think into the future as well, think out. But we don't do that without thinking, can these guys contribute right away? And we have a vision for both those guys, how they can contribute and be a part. And they represent a lot of the qualities that we like in our players. And they were the best players there for us at the time. And so we're thrilled to add those guys to an already strong room. And we're ready to roll forward. And we've got to find a way, like I said, just to get that much better. And we think we really helped our roster throughout this offseason, free agency, into the draft. And we're fired up about our team.
Now, the entire centerpiece of the 49ers plan is Brock Purdy. This is the reason they're able to play the short-term, long-term game, because he's on that rookie contract now. He's an MVP finalist, but he's going to be paid a little bit later, probably next year. That means they're going to have to transition to the long-term plan. You talk about Purdy being the centerpiece, so you want to know the story behind Purdy, and I think that John Lynch divulged some more information. Who gets credit for finding Brock Purdy? Well, it's Bobby Slowick's brother, Steve Slowick, an area scout in the Midwest for the 49ers, Brian Greasy, the 49ers QB coach, and obviously you got to give credit to the entire staff for ultimately picking Brock Purdy in the draft. But listen to John Lynch talk about credit for Brock Purdy.
A lot of the roster stuff, I think, is potentially because you have the cheapest draft pick available contract at the highest priced position. Connor has a question for you.
Yeah, obviously someone who loves the wide receivers, Brock Purdy. And we all know in this room that 2 years ago you guys had Purdy as the number one player in the draft. You just luckily didn't have to take him till 262. What did you see in Brock, John, when you guys were looking at him and drafting him? And then now, here you are, 2 years later, two NFC championships, one Super Bowl appearance later. What do you see from him now and kind of his growth? And are you mentally prepared for a $500 million check, or how are you going to do that?
Way to set me up for success. But no, you always, I think the people you don't hear about, the unsung heroes, like in these organizations, and that's, to me, it's our scouts, it's our coaches, and I think two people deserve so much credit for Brock Purdy, and one of them now is in our pro department. He's a guy by the name of Steve Slowick. His brother's Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator down there in Houston. But Steve was the college scout that would go through Iowa State, and we thought Brock might come out into the league the year before. We had high grades on him, actually a little higher his junior year than his senior year. But Steve was a guy who had the benefit of going into that school, hearing Matt Campbell, who did such a great job at Iowa State turning that program around. And Steve would always come during these draft meetings, in the fall meetings, in the draft meetings, and just speak so glowingly about Brock and the culture changer he was, how Iowa State would not be where they're at without Brock Purdy. And Steve was seeing it with his own eyes, but he was also telling us what Matt Campbell was saying. And Matt Campbell had been, there's good recommenders, and Matt had always proven to be a really good recommender. When he believed in a guy, it usually translated. And so Steve was very integral in that process. The other guy I'd say was Brian Greasy. Brian was incredibly impressed once we kind of gave Brian to him and said, hey, get on these Zooms, start talking to Brock. And Greasy came back extremely convicted. And then it's in Kyle's hands, it's in my hands, and we start watching. And, we were so smart, we waited till the very last pick to draft him. And thank God he was there. He's been tremendous for our organization.
Lynch also detailed how Brock Purdy ultimately took the 49ers starting job. And not only did that, obviously after injuries to Trey Lance, to Jimmy Garoppolo, but first used his gunslinger mentality, his gunslinger style to turn some heads earlier in 49ers training camp. Even when that wasn't the safest play, Brock Purdy, he was courageous out there in training camp. He took some chances. Listen to John Lynch explain how that all went down.
And you really could see it right away. I think he was 4th on our depth chart. And there's a corny saying that people say, about training camp and like, don't count your reps, make your reps count. And the one thing we saw about Brock, he'd get like 3 or 4 reps a practice when we first started. But man, he didn't come in and just play it safe. He was ripping it in windows that were small and doing so with confidence. That's a hard thing to do because it's an easy way to get run right out of here when you're the last pick in the draft and you're trying to make these bold plays. But he just played with a confidence, a poise, and you start seeing that. Then it's like Kyle says, well, let's give him 6 reps, and then let's give him 8 and 10. And he just kept kind of doing it over and over and over again. And Trey got hurt, and, he eventually just kept getting better. And then ultimately Jimmy Garoppolo, who had come back, got hurt versus Miami. Brock goes in, and kind of the rest is history.
All right, we'll have much more here from Prague and the Czech Republic over the coming couple days. 49ers through Europe continues.